and welcome to Irish Roots. Today, I'm going to be in conversation with Tim Brannigan. Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, hi, Grace.
I'll
Thank
give you a
you
little...
very much for the invite. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to have this conversation. I'll kind of run you through a little bit how this is going to work. I have some questions for you, and I'll ask them. We'll converse about it, and we'll just have an old chat if that's okay with you.
That's cool in the gang.
Awesome. Okay, so the first question that I have for you is, can you tell us about what it was like growing up for you?
Okay, I most certainly can. Would you like me to go back to my origin story or start?
Yeah, start at the beginning. Might as well.
That's quite a story, like Grace. Okay. This camera is propped up against a stack of books, one of which just happens to be my own memoir. Okay, and just for the viewers following, hello everyone. I wrote a memoir. It came out in 2010, and it's called, and I suspect that a lot of people watching this might relate, but it's called "Where Are You Really From?" And that's probably one of the questions I get asked most in life is, "Where are you really from, Tim?" And I'll say, "Beechmount, Falls Road." I go, "No, but where are you really from?" And I take that, and again, Grace, you will appreciate this. That question is a challenge, and the word "really" is the key, and it is a challenge by white people to people of color, blacks. I will probably come on to this. I'm comfortable with the word black. I see it, whereas my mum, who was white, has passed away. My mum didn't like me to use that word, but I wear it as a badge of pride rather than mixed race. Or not that there's anything wrong with mixed race, but I feel it's important to embody the word black and blackness. Black is important for me because it was a word that was avoided when I was a child. In school, people would have said, well, I grew up in an era, I'm 55 on Monday, so I grew up in an era, Grace, where people used the word coloured freely. And I think that was to do with a lack of understanding, a lack of any experience of interacting with black people. And I think they thought that the word black, especially here in the north of Ireland, the word black would have had a very negative connotation, not because of colour, but because of the police force, and probably because there are a couple of loyal institutions up here that Protestants subscribe to. The most famous one is the Orange Order, but there's also another similar organisation called the Royal Black Institution, right? So sometimes if you see Protestants marching with sashes and bowler hats and all, they're orange. Sometimes the sashes are a different colour, and that would be the Royal Black Institution, I think it's called. So for nationalists and Catholics, the term, I'm not sure what language we're allowed to use on here, but the term black bastard would be a term that nationalists would use against the police and also against maybe extreme loyalism. Okay? Now, if you're a black person and you come to Belfast and you hear someone shouting, "You black bee," at the cops, that can be very unnerving for black people from England, for example. And I'll give you a more topical example. I was at the Black Lives Matter protest in Belfast last summer, and I was near the edge of the crowd, and there were PSNI Land Rovers and PSNI police officers standing nearby, and a girl standing beside me who lives very nearby. She turned around, saw the jeeps, and shouted, "Yous black bastards," at a Black Lives Matter rally. And then she immediately covered her face, and her friends were going, "Shh." And I was sort of giving her dirty looks and things. But on one level, I thought, why did you have to shout that? On another level, I thought, that's what Catholics shout at the cops. And that's what they've always shouted. Now,
confusing with the importance of language and understanding and unpacking all of that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I didn't know that. That's new information for me.
There's a famous. I'm a Republican, as you probably know, and I used to drink in Republican bars. And one of the songs, a pro-IRA song, has a famous line in it. It's about an IRA man who's shooting at the British and the cops, and the line in it, which everyone sung at the tops of their voices, was in bars along this road. Everyone sang, "And when you die and go to heaven, there'll be no black B word there," right? Now, I have sung that song when I was much younger, and I have laughed while the people around me we've all sort of joked and understood the dual meaning, right? But that was my community. I was of that community. I was part of it, and I played along. I could have. By that stage, I was reading Malcolm X's memoir and stuff, autobiography, and George Jackson and all these black militant leaders and stuff from the 60s and 70s. So it's not like I wasn't aware, this is complex. I absolutely was, but in the 1980s, I thought, we hadn't heard of the term political correctness, but I thought, well, I can either turn to the people around me and say, why are you singing that? Or I can play the game and join in and understand what it is. And for when I was quite young, I would have sang the line and things like that, right? Or I would have, as people were singing it, I would be doing that, as a sort of joke, right? I absolutely understood, and at times it felt uncomfortable, depending on who the crowd was or what I overheard being said. And sometimes there'd be people going, "Your man over there, people are singing this," and other people would be self-conscious and stuff like that, So my life, where are you really from, is a challenge. It's a challenge. My book is about identity. Where are you really from is a key question in identity. The word "really" is obviously the issue, because, as I'm sure you've experienced all around the place when you've traveled and stuff and where you live, the word "really" is Irish, white Irish people saying, okay, yes, you've got a Dublin accent, or in my case, a Belfast accent, and you've got in my case, you've an Irish sounding name, but we're still not buying. I'm still not buying this. You aren't Irish. And
it's just that question is just so loaded. Like
you're
not even just really asking, where are you really from? You're asking 10 million questions, and get to the point. Like, ask me what you want to ask me.
Yeah.
Why is my skin brown? Where do I get, like that? That's basically where you're going with this. So let's just take off the silly, where are you really from? Because literally, I'll tell you, I've had I'm doing a couple of these interviews, and every person that I've spoken to, we always talk about that question: where are you from? Ireland. Oh no, but where are you really from? Every single person.
I try to laugh it off, but it's actually a challenge to your authenticity, your humanity, and your identity as a person. And it is people taking upon themselves the right to challenge your view of yourself, and
absolutely
give me better answers. I want more satisfaction from you. Prove to me you're Irish, Now, after a long while, I've stopped playing that game, and I was with singing songs about black bees or whatever. I've stopped playing the game. I've stopped making people feel comfortable about the situation. It's not like they're asking me, which football team do you support? You know, Liverpool, by the way. It's not like they're asking that. It's a much more fundamental thing, and then they have the nerve to challenge you on it. You know, people who've only just met you, and I'll give you this wee story. Okay, here's a story I tell. We'll probably come on to this, but I was in jail 1990 to 95, and after I got out, one of the first things I did was go on a trip to Dublin and to meet my best friend, who I hadn't seen in a few years. He's a Republican and he couldn't come across the border, so he never came to see me in jail too much or anything. So raced down with a few people in a car and stayed in Tala. Got wrecked on the Friday night and or the Saturday night, and the next day I woke up in a house in Tala, 4 or 5 fellas, everyone lying on the floor, wiped out, and I got up and walked out, and it was beautiful Sunday morning, and it was July. It was scorching hot, so I thought, the smell of drink. I thought, I'm going outside, and I went out and sat on the garden wall. And so I looked into the garden next door, and there was this little kid there, 6 years, 7 years tops, right? Just wearing a wee pair of trousers and no shirt on, no t-shirt, and his face was head shaved. His wee face was dirty. He hadn't been washed yet, and he was playing around in the garden, right, kicking a ball and stuff. And I said, hiya, and I was chatting away to him, and he was looking at me, and he was a wee bit of a distance away, and I was going, are you talking? And I just wanted to hear a wee Dublin accent and things, you know. And eventually I won his confidence over, and I was saying, my name's Tim, what's your name? And all that. So eventually I won him over, and he started to speak to me, and out of the blue he said, he's 6, 7 years old, and I would have been in my mid-30s at the time. This was 1995. And he said, I can't really do accents well, but he said, are you one of the black babies? And I said, no. And he said, I can't do accents, I'll stop the accents. He said, yes, you are. And I gave you money. And I said, you didn't give me any money. He said, I did. I gave you money. I gave money to my teacher in school for the black babies because you're
I already
poor.
know where you're going.
When he sees an adult and it's a black adult, he is not only prepared to label me, but then is confident enough to say, and you're poor, and so I have to give you money. And I thought, in the mid-90s, what a flipping terrible negative image to have. Now the little boy, obviously innocent little kid, and I talked and joked with him for half an hour, but that story stuck with me. You know, we talked off air, a wee minute ago about labels and what words black people use to describe themselves, and also I think as you were saying, that's a negotiation that goes on nearly all your life, you know, and some, you know, I would have been okay with the word coloured when I was younger, and in school, kids would have called me half caste, and then I, you know, through reading and programs and stuff, I realised that's quite a negative term and things like that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, with black people and people like yourself, we take it upon ourselves to debate these issues all the time. They're always live. They're always current. And I've never spoken to you before. Here we are, 20 minutes into deep definitions and experiences, challenges that we experience. I mean, my life is so bonkers. For example, I'm in this apartment 3 years. There's never been a black person in it. I've never had a black girlfriend. Lots of the things that I see people doing on Twitter, I would say to friends and stuff, sort of joking, I do this exaggerated joke, and I go, that's what I miss. There's my black culture. There's my people. Whether it's five guys in a flipping open-air basketball court in New
Yeah.
York just shooting shots. And I just, a lot of stuff that you see in scenes in music videos, I look and I think, fuck me, I would love that experience. I would love to walk into a bar with three black people. And I've never done it. I'm 55 and I've walked into a lot of bars and a lot of Saturday nights.
It's coming your way, Tim, I tell you that.
Never walked into a bar with a girl on my arm, a black girl on my arm. No, nothing. And I even discussing this with you now, I have this discussion all the time. It's usually a white person sitting in your seat, and I'm sort of trying to educate them in this and trying to stress them. Whereas with you, I don't need to. You've got to believe this really happened. You just go, yeah, tell me about it.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is almost like I was having this conversation with someone last week about how when you're talking to somebody who reflects you, you can kind of relax. Like you don't have to be on edge, or you don't have to be waiting for what are they going to say, or are they going to believe me, or how much am I going to have to try and convince them? It's just we already understand what, like, I get what you're saying, because it's, you might as well be talking about.
And so when you see people, whether it's in England or America or something, people get shot, and there's all this discussion about parents having the talk with their kids and stuff, and I actually, sadly, that is one experience that I have had with my mum, who was way ahead of her time and very politically and socially aware. And so she was telling me, even when I didn't fully understand it, life is going to be hard for you. You're going to find people who don't like you. You're going to get rejected from jobs because of your color and things like that. And so my mum treated me very differently from her four white sons, and was extremely hard on me. But that was because she knew what the world was like. She knew what it was like for black people, and she also knew what it was like as a nationalist. She knew what it was like to be oppressed and to have your rights denied, because she was a Catholic in a Protestant state. So she knew that, and she knew it was going to be doubly hard for me. And so the one thing that she insisted on, and throughout my life, I could probably be quite a lazy guy if everything's mañana, with me. But when my mum was alive, she was, have you applied for jobs? Have you done your homework? And she was very strict on a number of things. And she told me this wee story, for example. When I was a child, 3 or 4, she looked out the window in our home, and I was standing at the garden gate, and I was having a pee, and she ran out and grabbed me and started smacking me and slapping me around the bum and all that. I don't remember the incident. I know that she told me later, And I was saying, so what were you so angry for? I said, every little child pees, half the time they do it indoors, on the living room carpet. What was that such a... And she said, because the neighbours were watching, and I didn't want them thinking, look at the little black kid, no manners, no training, they're animals. Now, to be honest, that was sort of my mum's paranoia. I think, my neighbours were, generally speaking, very good people, But obviously you can understand the perception and my mum's concerns, and her discipline with me was all in a good cause, because and people would acknowledge, and family members and all would acknowledge, she was hard to me, probably to an unfair degree, right? No probably about it. It was unfair, but it was well intentioned, and I forgive her for it. But I'm the only one of 5 sons who went to university, and that was because she dragged me through exams. She read over my homework and said, do that again, write that out again, and do better writing and stuff. On Sunday nights, I to this day, I get Sunday night dreads, and it was because of my mum's sort of relentlessness. And whereas my brothers were lying over on the sofa, their legs up, and watch for tea and all of that. And on Sunday nights, they'd have been sitting watching Planet of the Apes or whatever it was. They weren't worried about, doing their homework too much. Or they would say to my mum, yeah, it's done. And she'd go, right, fine. But with me, it was always, show me, right? And, but now, it's much more of an issue for my brothers. Why was Tim the one she looked after? Why was Tim the one? And she said to me, you're not working on building sites. You're not doing manual work. And I said, well, what's your problem with that? What's wrong with manual work? And because my brothers, one's a joiner, one's an engineer, one was a mechanic, and the fourth one was civil service. And she said, there's nothing wrong with manual work. Manual work's fine, but this is a white country. If you're on a building site, you're going to be the butt of all the jokes all the time. If something goes wrong, something gets stolen, you'll be the suspect, right? So you're going to work hard, you're going to do that homework, and you're going to go to university, and you're going to become a doctor, or you're going to become a professional. Now, I was growing up in a very working class area, there weren't any doctors or everyone was a labourer and working on building sites and things. But I ended up with a degree in politics, you know what I mean? And I've written a book on all. I guess at this stage I should maybe tell you a little bit about my family background.
Yeah, I was about to say, tell us a little bit about
it now. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of background, and I'll help people understand my mum's motivations and her unusual parenting of me. So my mum was called Margaret Peggy, and she was born into a Catholic family in Belfast, 1933. Catholic family. That was the same year, 1934, I think it was the year that the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland made this statement. All I boast is that we are a Protestant Parliament and a Protestant state for a Protestant people, right? So that was my mum was born into that world, which I guess to some extent was a bit like don't know. Well, no, that was it. She was a Catholic, and she knew that she was going to be in a minority, right? And was treated as such. And we nationalists were treated with contempt. My mum grew up in a very poor working class area, but her family owned a local chip shop and a local sweet shop. So even in a poor area, everyone had that type of lifestyle. But my mum's parents had these two businesses. And so that meant that relative to the poverty around them, they were well off. Not affluent, but relatively well off. And I suppose a very typical example of how that manifested itself or two was at Christmas, my mum's family had a big proper gas cooker when everyone else had one little ring. So my mum's family on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve would cook the turkeys for half the people in the street, and they would all give a little money towards the gas, and they did that. And then they did the chips, and also meant that then they had a little bit of a stake in the community, right? They were seen as little pillars, and people got food on tick from them and stuff, until and then paid the bills later and things like that. The Brennan family had 5 or 6 sons, and then my mum came along. My mum was very attractive, brunette woman, exceptionally attractive, and so she was a bit spoiled, to be brutally honest. She got the best of gear in a world where everyone was using hand-me-downs and second-hand clothes and things like that. My mum's family had the 2 businesses, so my mum was bought to the best shop in town and was spoiled and bought very good clothes and things like that.
Mm.
And eventually she married a guy called Tom, and he was a lorry driver, and he had a motorbike, and he would drive up to her door and pick her up on her motorbike. And again, in an area of grinding poverty, even having that, you know, and they were showing off and flying around and stuff like that, and they went for wee jaunts out the countryside. So she married this guy. They had 3 children, but the marriage wasn't great. Her husband was also a singer in a band, so he had Fridays and Saturday nights out to be playing in clubs and pubs, right? And he had a bit of a wandering eye, and he had a few affairs. My mum found out about it. 1960s came. The marriage wasn't great. They were still together, but the marriage wasn't great. And she went out on a night with 3 girls in Belfast in the 1960s, very white city, and they went out. She went out with their girlfriends, and they were in this bar, and a black guy walked up to them, and he was 6'3", 6'4", West African black, so black Africa really, and from he's from Ghana. He's very black, and he came over and he said, "Would any of you ladies like to dance?" And my mum's friend ran around behind her and said, "I'm not dancing with the N-word," right? And my mum was mortified. So in the 1960s, my mum was very into civil rights movement in America and had a natural predisposition, which I'll tell you about later, towards black people, right? And so she was offended. So in the 60s, they had a thing called Ladies' Choice, where the band would play a song, say, "This is Ladies' Choice," and the lady could ask the man to dance. So it was a chance to. My mum, fairly determined woman, she marches across the dance floor, says, "Come on, dance," and gets this guy up to dance and apologizes for her friend's language. And within an hour, an affair starts. And within a few weeks, within a couple of months, my mum finds herself pregnant while married with 3 white kids to a white man in a white city in a very conservative country, right? And she knew, I don't think her and her husband were sleeping together too much, right? So she knew, this baby's going to be black. And she fretted for 9 months. And the thought of bringing scandal on the family, and she agonized about what to do about it for 9 months or whatever time she was pregnant. And my book starts off with what I'm about to tell you, okay? My book starts off on the day I was born, page 1, line 1. And my mum found herself pregnant, went into the hospital and said to the obstetrician or whatever the guy is that look after these things, said to the doctor in charge, "What I've just told you, this baby is going to be black, and I can't have this coming out." Now, this was 1960s, before the internet age, before the right of freedom of information and all of that, right? And the doctor, who was a Protestant, by the way, she chose a discreet hospital on the far side of town, well away from where she lived, and so that she wouldn't be noticed, people wouldn't recognize her, and she went to a Protestant area. And the doctor was a Protestant. She told him what I've just told you, and he said, "Right." And on the day I was born, I was hidden in a room in the hospital, and the doctor came out and spoke to my mum's husband, her children, and her brothers and sisters, and he said, "She's lost the baby." And everyone bought it, and everyone thought that I died. So the opening line of my book is, I was born on 10th of May 1966. I died the same day. A few days later, my mum was released on hospital. She was released on a Sunday, as it happened. She was getting into my uncle's car, or her husband's car, to be driven back home, and just bad timing on the part of the hospital or whatever. But at the same time, the nurse was coming out with me in her arms and got into the car in front, and I was to be taken to a baby home. And my mum went into hysterics, and but people couldn't understand and were thinking, "Oh, she's lost the baby." But my mum was watching her child being taken away by a nurse she didn't know to a baby home, and I was left there. I say left; it wasn't abandoned. I found the records, and there's a big leather ledger, like something out of a Dickens movie, a big wide ledger. And alongside my name, it says, food, farties, rusks, my weight. And then over on the right, there's a little section for comments, and it says, not for adoption. Yeah, I was left in the hospital for a year, and then my mum pretended to adopt me. So I grew up I was a child, 4 brothers, no sisters, and we all thought that I was adopted. In 1995, on the day of the Live Aid, the original Live Aid concert, it was Bob Geldof and the Worldwide Concerts. That was the day she said, "I have something to tell you." And we were at a family party. There was alcohol involved, and she said, "I have something to tell you about your father." And she told me what I've just told you. And then she said, "I don't be telling anyone." And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "No, we were in my uncle's holiday home, so maybe 20 people in a small cottage." And I said, "Does no one know?" And she's going, "No, don't you say anything, Jesus Christ." And I said, "Do my brothers know?" She said, No, and don't you ever tell them." And so my mum died in 2004. My brothers, 3 of them found out, I think, on her deathbed. She was in a bed dying, and she said, "I've something to tell you. Timothy's your real brother," And so I found that out in Live Aid Day, 13th of July, 85. Said nothing, got on with my life. Went to Liverpool, did a degree in 1990, politics degree. Graduated in July. By October, I was back in Belfast. And one night in October 1990, 2 IRA men came to the door, and they said, "Tim, I'm from a very Republican family. My mum was a Republican. She believed in fighting against injustice. And I still read books about injustice and all of that, left-wing books to this day. The IRA called the door. Long story short, can you do us a favour? Can you hold some weapons? Oh, I really shouldn't do this. Please, Tim, we're really stuck. Okay, right. They'll be away in the morning. I said, right, okay. As long as they're away in the morning. There's a car at the side of the house. This isn't my home. I'm just home from England on holiday, and my mum's not here. But there's a car at the side of the house, and the doors are open. So if you were to dump anything in there, I wouldn't need to know about it. More or less was the deal, right? And that's what they did. But there was an informer, and he spotted them, and he phoned the cops. And so before I knew it, the IRA men got away. But within a few hours, the cops hit the house, and me and my mum were arrested, right? And I was thinking, what are you arresting my mum for? She doesn't know about it. My mum was out working at the time it happened, 6 in the evening, and she came home to carnage. She's going, what's going on? And the house was being raided and things like that. So I didn't say anything to her. We were both sitting in the living room, and they came and arrested her and not me. And I was like, oh my God, And but I couldn't just say, oh, it's not her. I'm involved. So I said nothing, and we were arrested in Castlereagh. Eventually, I signed a statement. Said my mum, 4 of us were arrested over the next couple of days, and I signed a statement taking responsibility, and my mum and my brothers were released. Went to jail 1990, got out in 95. The ceasefire was called in 94. I'm very on board for the ceasefire. I got out, looked around and thought, my work here is done. I don't want to get involved in the political side of things anymore. I've given a lot to the cause. I was an activist during the hunger strikes, Bobby Sands and stuff like that. I was hanging up black flags, helping paint murals, giving out leaflets, loads of activism, day and daily. And then I just focused on trying to become a journalist and kept my head down, didn't mention my past. And And when I went for journalism interviews, again, this could be people's mindset and don't want to say prejudice, but conditioning, I suppose. But when I walked into media interviews, no one thought he looks like an IRA man to me. You know, they just thought, all right, okay, this could be interesting, and I started getting freelance work, was quite successful, and got a job with the Irish News, and so yeah, I became a journalist straight after being in jail, and it was a very unusual experience, and things went well for a while. Then in 2004, my mum had a brain tumour. I spent a year looking after her, and she died. Yeah, 2003 she had a tumour, and died in 2004. All of her life, she wanted me to search for my father, and all of my life, I was super Republican, super Irish. In terms of where you're really from, I thought in order to end that question in my life, I became the most Irish man in Ireland, you know, overcompensating. Whenever the British soldiers came into our street, they were soldiers from Scotland, Manchester, Liverpool, London, right? When they got to Belfast, the last thing they expected to see in the 1970s was a black kid in the middle of all this. And when they saw me, they did not hold back, you know, because they were being shot at, they were being bombed, with an intensity that you could hardly imagine today, right? You know, 1972, I think there were 470 odd people killed. It was worst year of the Troubles. I was 6. Our house was a safe house. The IRA were coming in and out of our house when I was that age. I remember Bloody Sunday. You know, I remember the black flags hanging out and stuff like that. And when the British Army came into the street and saw me, they would start shouting. When I was 6 and 7, British soldiers were saying to me, "You fucking black bastard, and what are you doing here? And you fucking nigger and Sambo," and all of this coon words I'd never heard before. And they would shout to each other, and they would say, "Oh, come on over, listen to his accent." And they were amazed to hear a black guy with an Irish accent, black guy, child. And but what that did for the white people in my street, my little boys my age, and for their parents, they would say, "Don't you worry, Tim, you're one of us. You're one of us. Don't listen to them, you fucking British bastards," and stuff like that. So this racial slurring and attacks and verbal stuff going on all the time. And it wasn't one incident. And so, you know, supporting Ireland, being a Republican, very pro-Irish on everything, you know, football and stuff. Wanting Ireland to do well, wanting Ireland to beat England, all of that. And by the way, that just made me the same as every other 6-year-old Irish kid.
Yep.
Right? And but I did have this unusual attention, and at such a young age. And I've said in interviews since, what I realise now is it was just systematic racism and child abuse, right? And now you might people could say, "Well, you supported the Republicans and the IRA, so what do you expect?" And on one level, I think, you know, yeah, this is what they do, and this is what life in a conflict is like. Or, you know, you lived in Chicago for 6 years, you know, there's a very particular relationship with the cops, and much as you want to change it, the important thing to do is to learn to adapt to it and be ready for it. And so I learned the skills that kept me on board with my own community. So my mum was heavily involved in all of that, and that's what influenced me. I grew up through the 70s supporting the struggle. And
sorry, Tim, earlier you had just mentioned that your mom always wanted you to find your dad. Did you ever look for him? Did you ever have any interest in that?
While she was alive, not a chance. No. And I thought, I'd be very, very honest with you. Okay, even for a black person, I've had a very well, I've experienced depression in jail and things like that, right? But in terms of day-to-day living, I've lived as a black person in a white world, and so when I saw black people in the 80s and stuff like that, I'd be fucking self-conscious. And yes, here's another key moment. When I was at school, I was the only black kid in the school. Even as kids, well before any sort of national curriculum or civics lessons were ever on any school curriculums, and race and diversity and all the things that thankfully we have now around diversity didn't exist in the 70s. When I went to school, the kids had enough about them to realise, well, if Tim calls you ginger nut or Tim calls you specky, it's not really fair to reply with you fucking nigger or something like that, right? So I ended up getting a little invented nickname at school when kids wanted to slag me, and it was actually Salt and Vinegar. My kids in class would call me Salty, stuff like that. And that's because one day I was sitting at home having my chips, and without looking, I started putting the vinegar not over my chips but into my tea, and my brother told everyone, and then people called me Salt and Vinegar, and that became an acceptable little, you know, there was specky, fatso, ginger nut, you know, and then so they gave me this acceptable name to be called in school, right? Which was quite a sophisticated and progressive little move by these kids, right? But only in that class. Once I got out, other kids in the school, some of them who didn't know me, ones who were younger and wanted to be smart and stuff, thought they would show off to their classmates. They would call me Sambo and stuff like that, right? I used a lot of conflict avoidance as well, Grace. So I never went to the school canteen, right? Not once did I have a school dinner. You avoided the smoke, were the guys who did all the smoking and all the bad kids. I avoided those wee corners and stuff. And so just to this day, conflict avoidance is my watchword. You know, don't go into that area. Don't socialize with those guys. Stay over here. Don't join that group. All of that. All the things you do. You know, don't walk down that street at night. Don't drink in that bar. You know, there's a bar where black people go. Go to the R&B clubs, things like that. And and again, black people, that's what you do. And then a lot of the time, in places of work and all, my first job was as a hairdresser. A stylist walked in one day and said, I was only a junior at 16, and I looked like a 12-year-old. And the senior stylist walked in one day and said, "Oh my God!" And it was a big salon in Belfast, by the way, so it was quite a snobby, trendy place. And the stylist walked in and said, "Oh my God, I'm slaughtered today. I'm working like a nigger out there," you know. And then I'd go, "Oh, no offense, all right." Oh, by the way, if the British Army came into the street, but there was a British soldier among them who was black, that sent everything haywire. So the Brits would come into the street, right, walking, maybe 12. They usually patrolled in groups of 12 or 16, blocks of 4, right? And so they come into the street, and whenever I saw the first ones coming around the corner, I'd be looking, and sometimes I would consciously edge towards my own front gate. And then I was thinking, well, I can just sort of quietly slip into the house here before they get any further, because once they get close enough within verbal range, the jokes will start, right? But sometimes they arrived in jeeps, things like that, and then they would just be on top of you before you knew it. But if there was a black soldier among them, this is what happened. The British soldier would look around, and you're talking about guys who were 21 and 22, working class guys from Manchester, Glasgow, and London, right? And so when they saw me, they're walking around bored and stuff, or tired, and they saw me. It was a chance to let a bit of aggression out, a bit of tension, and then make jokes. But if there was a black soldier among them, the white people in the street would say, "What are you talking about? He's a nigger too," or
Mm.
you know, tell him to go back to the jungle. You know what he's talking about. And these white friends of mine would say the same
Your
things
age.
as the Brits, and then say, "Don't you worry, Tim. You're one of us. I support Liverpool." Same happened on the Cup at Anfield. A big guy started shouting at Paul Parker, a Man United player who was black, right? Or started shouting at him, and this girl said, "Daddy, stop shouting that." He was leading the singing, right? And stop shouting that. This girl who was the same age as me, and he turned around and he saw me and he said, "Oh, don't worry, he's one of us," and reaches over to shake my hand, and I shook his hand to play the game. And so Republicans and nationalist people in Beachmount, Liverpool fans, whatever, you can be black and you can sometimes be okay for them as long as you play their game on their
Yeah, you go by their rules.
on their terms, right?
Mhm.
So there were scenes where black people and white people, or British soldiers and Irish nationalists, were shouting at each other, and there would be me and this black soldier, and we'd be looking at each other, just glancing up, and the black soldier would never say anything. There were a lot of things would be like, "Hey, Joe, is this your wee brother, or is this your son?" Things like that. Some people in the area thought that I was the son of a black soldier, so on and so forth. And then I realized, so you imagine that when you're a child, you've got it down. Oh, there's the British Army. They've got the uniforms on. They stick out. The funny accents. They've got guns. Can't miss them. They're the enemy. And then all of a sudden, the people who were saying you're one of us were using the same language, and they would turn to me and say, "Oh, don't worry, Tim. You're one of us.
We don't mean you." Yeah.
This isn't about you."
Yeah. So, Tim, sorry to cut across you because we're actually coming up to time.
Yeah.
And before we go, I just wanted to ask you, first of all, if there's anything else that you want to share quickly, you can totally do that now. And then also, I wanted to ask you what your hopes are for the future.
Well, I hope to check my emails as I do every Friday and hope that my agent has said, "Tim, there's been contact from Hollywood." And I'm starting on a new book now after 3-4 years of fairly difficult life circumstances, issues that I've mentioned here that have come back to haunt me, issues around my family, my brothers, and what the impact of them learning that their lives were a lie in some ways, and that their mum's biggest secret was kept from them. So my brothers learned a lot about their lives when they read my book, because my mum confided in me and not them, and we had this big secret together, and so it has caused fairly negative upheaval in the last couple of years, and I've been around a lot of corners, so I'm on my own now, just in case people want to know. I did go to Africa. I think my mum wanted to say to my father, who's a doctor, very successful doctor, and then he worked for the United Nations and became a research doctor and worked for the UN on finding a cure for malaria. And so he's quite an esteemed, he's presented papers and stuff like that. He's quite an esteemed, learned gentleman, and as with a lot of Africans as well, this is maybe where I differ, be quite religious, right? Things like that. But I tracked him down. After my mum died, I tried to get my career back on track as a journalist. Went to a radio journalism 1-day course, and there was a guy from Radio 4 in London, Tony Phillips, who's a very accomplished producer, and I went to his wee talk in Belfast, and then sent him some emails about ideas about blackness. And if you Google me, you'll see a photograph of me standing at wall murals on the Falls Road, and if you look behind me on the mural, it's it's a mock-up of the famous window in London, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. It says London 1968 on it, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Belfast 2005, it says no bigotry, no racism, no prejudice. That's painted down on the Falls Road, right? And I went up, and I know the mural painters. I used to be a minor one, not. I would have filled in the straight lines on a mural, sort of thing. I didn't do the actual artwork. Don't want to overstate it, but I did help, do a mural ANC 1985 for 1980 or ANC IRA One Struggle was, in my area, and I helped paint that, and was very committed. I identified with these black South Africans and stuff like that, right? And Sinn Féin identified with the black South Africans. Loyalists, by the way, in Belfast identified with the whites. Loyalists identified with the Israelis. Me, Republicans, nationalists probably identify more with the Palestinians, things like that, right? So I think my mum wanted to say, you left me with your child, and this is what I've made of your son, which is why the education was important, and she was never going to let me slack. And I think she wanted to say, isn't he articulate? Isn't he bright? And because I think my mum, although she said it was a brief affair, I know that it went on much longer than she admitted, right? Even though he wasn't good to her. The doctor in the Royal, or the doctor who delivered me, said, Mrs. Brannigan, can I ask you one personal question? And she said, yes. This is why she was in having me. And she said, do you mind if I ask you who the father is? And my mum told him. And he said, So I'll have a bit of bad news for you, Mrs. Brannigan. He said, this isn't the first time this man has left this woman in this situation, or left a woman in this situation. Right? Since the book came out, I've had 4 people contact me thinking that he was their father.
Wow.
Yeah. And I met one of my sisters in London, and half sisters. We just met in British Home Stores Cafe, and I tracked her down first. Went, met her, and told her. I said to her, now there are things I'm going to tell you here that you need to be careful what you say about your father. They worship their father, right? They worship him. And so you need to be careful, because my experience of them is very different from yours. Some of them went to private schools. They had ballet lessons and stuff, right? Dance lessons. I was out throwing petrol bombs outside the window there, in very different experience. And he promised my mum was let down by the men in her life. He promised her that he would pay for a good education for me, and he didn't, and that killed her. That really killed her. And because I think she was sort of hoping that somewhere along the line, I know it sounds naive, but I think she was sort of hoping that it might work out, that he would come and sweep her away, and she could leave.
Live happily ever after.
Right. Now, she wouldn't have left us, but I think on a romantic level, she had this sort of notion that something could work out. But he let her down, and then I found out, later. So I confronted him about this when I met him and things like that. So you'll not be surprised to hear that after I came back from Africa, maybe a few months after that, and when I met him, sensational, amazing moments in my life, right? And they're mentioned in the book. I stole a line from the Paul Simon song, Under African Skies. We sat by a swimming pool at my hotel and chewed the fat, and it was sensational. And we talked about ISIS, blackness, black development in Africa, the black diaspora, everything. When I asked him, how did you meet my mum? He said, I can't answer that question. And I said, look, his name's Michael. I said, look, Michael, mum has already told me in considerable detail the story, but that's her side of it. Now, I'm a journalist. I'm more than willing, maybe my mum's lying, but my mum wasn't a liar. She's very authentic, a lot of integrity. And he said, no, I can't answer that. And I was like, but lots of people, every child in the world asks their mum and dad, how did you
How
two
did they
meet?
meet? Yeah.
And I said, why are you being so defensive? He compartmentalizes his life, and he's a successful
Wouldn't go
doctor,
into it.
pillar of the community, but there's this other side to him. And
Yeah, I mean, he had a
and
past.
so yeah, and so I went over, and I've I have three sisters and two brothers to him who live, and they're very successful people. They own a big computer company and stuff. One of them's a international rep for a major pharmaceutical company. But on the one day, for the first couple of weeks, they were saying, "Oh, what an experience! This is amazing. Where do you meet our father? He's an amazing man," and all of this. And then overnight, Facebook's closed, emails stopped, and all their phones put me on block. I've never heard of them since. Probably the very conservative father, I think there was a substantial will involved, and I think he said to them, either you go with him or you go with me, right? And that didn't take them long for that. And then and my brothers 3 years ago started to react very badly to the book and the enormity of, I think, maybe the betrayal they felt from my mum, but when they should have been angry at my mum, they turned angry at me.
Yeah, because they're getting the information from you. It's a lot. You've a lot going on. You've been through a lot.
I have, yes. But I want to try and be positive.
I mean,
I want to try and
absolutely. Let's.
I'm still standing. I'm still talking to people. I now have material for a new book. A new book will talk about Black Lives Matter, the arrival of people to Ireland who've got African accents and who've no interest in my story, or who've got very different stories, and some of them now get appear and have started appearing on local media and stuff, so I don't have to repeat traumas all the time, which is great, but I would have issues about how they see the world and what they do and things like that, but no, I remain very positive. Just got my flat, maybe I just got my apartment painted yesterday and today, so maybe that's put me in good form. Despite all the setbacks, despite being a wee bit lonely at times now, I still have a great circle of friends, but no black friends.
Yes, well, now you have one.
Hey, high five. So
thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely riveting listening to your story and everything that you've been through. And like I said, I could talk to you for hours upon hours about it, but we'll leave it there. Stay tuned for the next time that we have a little chat. We'll definitely get you on again. Thank you for tuning in to Irish Roots. Irish Roots is a completely volunteer-led festival. If you can donate, please do. For more information and to see what else is happening, jump over to our website. It's www.iamirish.org. From all of us at I Am Irish, Gurav Mila Mahagut.